Welcome, everyone. My guest today is Senior Reporter Brooklee Han to talk about the biggest real estate stories in 2024 and what will still be relevant in the new year. I want to thank our sponsor, Optimal Blue, for making this episode possible. Brooklee, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, I love it. So we are recapping the biggest stories in real estate in 2024. And could we have a more impactful year? I don't know.
I don't know. It's definitely been a crazy one. It's kept me on my toes for sure.
It's been crazy. Okay, so obviously, number one story, biggest story, which spawned 100 other stories, I think, is that the NAR settled commission lawsuits for $418 million in March. So tell us a little bit about what that felt like, what that happened, and if we expected that.
Oh gosh. I remember that day vividly, which is probably says a lot about the chaos that day was. But I remember thinking that morning, oh, it's Friday. I'm so looking forward to a quiet day. And that was definitely the wrong thing to think that day. But obviously, that I feel like has dictated so much of my coverage this year. So many of the other things that we've discussed this year have kind of come from the commission lawsuit settlement and from the business practice changes that were part of that settlement. Initially, obviously, we had that $418 million number, but there was very little else known about kind of what the settlement entailed, what it looked like. And over the ensuing weeks and days and months, those business practice changes came out. We learned a little bit more about why the National Association of Realtors decided to settle. Also about kind of the opt-in, opt-out option for some of the brokerages that may or may not be covered from the lawsuit, the MLSs as well that are non-realtor MLSs. And I feel like, that was such a big part of this past year. Kind of the next milestone with that came in April when the settlement received preliminary approval. I think for a lot of folks, that was like a moment where it was like, all right, this is real, this is happening. There may be a path forward out of kind of the past. At that point, it had only been about 8 months of kind of the Sitzer Burnett fallout, basically. And so that was a big deal. And then obviously, the industry had to navigate the business practice changes that went into effect in August. There's a lot of change this year kind of with that. There's no more offers of cooperative compensation on the MLS. There's buyer broker agreements that are mandated everywhere for realtor members, whereas previously they had only been mandated in certain states. So it was, that was a major change as well. And I think one of the biggest things that I enjoyed watching this past year was seeing how the real estate industry navigated these changes, how they came up with creative solutions, and how they, more importantly, worked together to kind of figure out and better understand these settlement changes and make sure everyone was on the same page in how they were interpreting things, because there wasn't a lot of guidance or information out there about, what these business practice changes entailed and what was necessarily okay versus not okay. And, I think a lot of big major players, major industry leaders, kind of were able to take a stand and to speak out and help a lot of folks, especially some of the smaller brokerages or agents and brokers who may not have had the guidance from their top-down leadership. And so I think that was fun to see and fun to watch. And it was, great to see all these educational resources come out. I think in the past couple of years, obviously at the height of the pandemic market, basically everyone was just trying to stay afloat. And then kind of as the market cooled, there was a lot of talk about education, but we weren't necessarily seeing a ton of that happen. And this kind of jump started that. And we're seeing a lot of brokerages really lean into education more so than they had previously. And I think, that's been another really fun thing to see. But obviously, right before Thanksgiving, we had the final approval come through on the settlement, which was really exciting. I think most people were expecting that to happen. There was little bit of back and forth. And of course, the Department of Justice weighed in, just a couple of days before that the final approval hearing was slated to take place. And now, we've had several appeals filed about the final approval. So, we're not out of the woods yet, but I feel like, everyone is heading into 2025 with kind of a renewed focus and feeling like there's less noise coming from the commission lawsuits, coming from the initial impact of the settlement. And yeah, it's been exciting to chat with some folks about the year ahead and to kind of see what's next. But it was definitely, I would feel for sure, kind of the biggest story of this past year.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And I think it is ironic to anyone paying attention that here we had this lawsuit that, like, oh, they were cooperating to like do price fixing or conspiracy or whatever you want to say. And actually, in order to, know, put into practice this change that was court ordered because of this, then it actually, there was a lot more collaboration. There was a lot more cooperation. There had to be.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to me. And none of that was like conspiracy. It's like, oh, okay, what form are we going to use? How do we interpret it? Are we all thinking about this the same way? How is this going to actually work so that the end client, so that the home buyer can still buy a house and it's not too disruptive? And so I agree with you that we saw so much of that and we reported on so much of that.
Mm-hmm.
Really the cooperation and the, kind of, big brokerages lending a hand to small brokerages, people being really open to like, answering questions that other maybe in the past and currently are rivals, but they really wanted just to make sure that we're all on, we're all able to deliver that for the client at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the biggest things that I heard thrown around was, at the end of the day, if we're all saying something different, it does not look good for clients and it confuses the public more than they're already kind of confused about everything that they're seeing in the news and hearing from, other folks. And if everyone is kind of more or less on the same page and understanding, what these business practice changes mean in the same way, then they're better able to communicate with the public and not be like, well, I just talked to one agent and they said this, and now you're saying this. And so, that would breed even more distrust of real estate agents, of realtors within the public. And that's something that, nobody wanted to see come out of any of this.
Oh boy, I think everyone would agree on that. So you mentioned the DOJ. That would be the other thing that's dominated a lot of real estate coverage this year because, and on several different fronts, right? So there was already an investigation they had into NAR. And earlier this year in April, I think, appeals court said, yes, DOJ can reopen its investigation into NAR. And not only that, then they weighed in on the commission lawsuits, right? Pretty recently, they came out against the NAR commission lawsuit settlement. So kind of walk us through what is up with the DOJ? Where are we with that? And what do you think as we're heading into 2025, different administration, will we continue to see a DOJ focus on NAR?
Absolutely. Yeah, so it's crazy to think that it was just earlier this year that the appeals court ruled that the Department of Justice could reopen its investigation into NAR. That feels like a different lifetime ago. But in fact, that was this April. But, with that, obviously, everyone expected the Department of Justice to immediately take action on the commission lawsuits. We'd seen them get involved in the No Select Commission lawsuit late in September of 2023. At that time, the DOJ could get involved with that lawsuit because NAR was not a party in that suit. MLS PIN, which is a MLS that is non-realtor association owned in kind of the Massachusetts, Greater Boston, Southern New Hampshire area, that they ended up involved in that lawsuit. But they didn't immediately jump into the Sitzer Burnett suit. They didn't get involved in the preliminary approval of NAR's settlement. But everyone was just kind of hanging out and waiting to see what would happen next, basically. We saw the DOJ file a statement of interest in the lawsuit that Rex had filed against Zillow and National Association of Realtors in the appeal of that decision. in which Zillow had come out victorious last in September of 2023 as well, if I'm not mistaken. And that was appealed by Rex. And so DOJ got involved there, and they were doing all of these things kind of beneath the surface a little bit, not really beneath the surface, but like not immediately in the Sitzer Burnett suit. So it wasn't grabbing kind of the same level of attention. And then, we were heading into Thanksgiving week, heading into the week of the final approval of NAR's settlement for the hearing for that. And on that Sunday night, the Department of Justice filed their statement of interest in the Sitzer Burnett suit. And yeah, as you said, they came out against the National Association of Realtors settlement agreement, which I don't think was unexpected necessarily, but the timing of it was, I guess, also not really unexpected. Definitely is giving a flair for the dramatic. I definitely appreciated that. But the way in which they disapproved of NAR's settlement was something I definitely hadn't considered, and I think a lot of folks in the industry had not considered. The DOJ has made it very clear that they don't want to see offers of cooperative compensation anywhere, from the MLS to a real estate agent's personal website showing their own personal listings. DOJ doesn't want those offers of cooperative compensation anywhere to be found. But that wasn't the issue that they took with NAR's settlement. It was with the buyer broker or buyer representation agreements, claiming that it may create anti-competitive practices by basically locking buyers into a certain agent, to a certain broker, before they had the opportunity to, maybe experiment with other brokers or other agents. And the reason those agreements were mandated is to get rid of the practice of steering, because, then by signing an agreement with the buyer and their agent, know exactly what their agent is going to make out of a successful home sale transaction. So that agent can't then go steering that buyer to a property that is offering, a larger commission versus one that's offering a smaller commission that might be a better suit for that buyer. And so the DOJ has made it clear that they also don't like the practice of steering. They don't want to see steering happen at all. So, I would be interested to hear what the DOJ's solution to all of this is. They haven't necessarily offered any insight into what they think the ideal or what their ideal is. But yeah, as you said, we're approaching, the inauguration in January, new administration. But I think a lot of people originally were expecting to see this be a smaller interest for the DOJ, to see less of an interest in antitrust in the real estate world. But given Trump's pick to lead the antitrust department within the DOJ, and also given the fact that, the current DOJ investigation, the appeal was about, that everything has kind of spiraled out of the fact that the Sitzer Burnett, the Morrill, the no select suits were all filed during the Trump administration, the first Trump administration. It's hard to believe that all of a sudden the real estate industry's Department of Justice issues will suddenly disappear. And we know that the DOJ has been kind of battling with National Association of Realtors for about 100 years now. And they finally have gotten some purchase in this battle, and they're finally starting to win some things. And I don't think they're going to let that go very easily. If this does become less of an area of focus for the DOJ, it may be the case for the next 4 years, but there will be another change of administration in 4 years' time. And, depending on which way that election goes, depending on kind of where focus lies, this could very well, again, flare up 4 years from now if it doesn't continue on as it currently is. So, yeah, this saga is definitely not over. We may have a little bit of a break, but I'm not too certain that that will be the case.
I think that's so interesting, right? There's not an easy fix really for the real estate industry. And I think that what you just said has been shared by people you've interviewed, whether they're from trade group leaders or, just big brokerage leaders, people you've talked to. So we'll have to wait and see. It's going to be one of those things that's going to be interesting to see in 2025, how that plays out. I think that some of the other big stories of the year were, besides many of them were connected to both of those topics, right?
Mhm.
Like how different companies are, being sued, settling suits, or how their business practice changes. We did have a big story, Zillow, right, where Zillow came out with something that launches buyer agreement for home tours. Because one of the biggest things that we had was like, how do you see a house? How do you do an open house if
Mhm.
you don't have an agent? And so we saw Zillow come in and try to do that. That was one of our big stories for the year. We also saw, VA rolled out temporary fixed to buyer agent commission problems, like all these things trying to plug the holes that were created by this settlement. What are some of the other things that stand out to you this year?
I think just one of the big things has been the conversation about Realtor Association membership and MLS access. I feel like this is an ongoing conversation, and I think it's going to be one of the big themes of 2025. We saw this conversation start, I'd say, early October of 2023. Redfin made its announcement that it had, like, enough was enough, I think is what, Glenn Kelman said, and that Redfin was asking its agents and brokers in areas where they could to not renew their NAR membership. And then also as part of brokerage settlement agreements, we saw, one of the conditions be that agents would not have to be, or were no longer required to be NAR members. And so that definitely kind of started this conversation back in the fall of 2023. And then, this year we saw several lawsuits filed, kind of taking aim at the three-way agreement, in which you have to be, well, in which a lot of cases you have to be a member of your local, state, and national realtor associations in order to have access to the MLS. There have been lawsuits about MLS access in the past. And so it kind of, there's a patchwork of kind of where things are, where membership is required, where it's not. You also have a lot of MLSs that are not Realtor Association owned, that kind of have their own rules about Realtor Association membership. But, with these lawsuits, and then also recently with Phoenix Realtors launching their MLS Choice program, and NAR has sent a cease and desist letter to Phoenix Realtors asking them to kind of end that program, which basically allows agents to join, or real estate licensees to join Phoenix Realtors for the MLS access, but then they don't have to join their state or national association. And National Association of Realtors has launched kind of the process to get rid of, or revoke the Phoenix Realtors charter for their realtor kind of membership and name usage. So we'll see what happens next with this. We know that the National Association, or the Department of Justice, one of the things they have looked into kind of is that membership structure, and kind of how the benefits that Realtor Association members have, lockbox access, and things like that. So I think this is definitely going to be a hot topic in the year to come. And then I think the other big topic of this year and also of next year is going to be clear cooperation, and just kind of how are listings going on the MLS? Are they going on the MLS? When do you have to put those listings on the MLS? We've had some brokerages, real estate industry leaders come out strongly against clear cooperation. And we've had a lot of folks, come out in support of clear cooperation, or in support of some version of clear cooperation. And I think, with the National Association of Realtors basically recently kind of putting a hold on that discussion, saying let's put a pin in it and reconnect and figure out what we want to do. That discussion has definitely been punted into 2025, and I think it'll be something we continue to discuss and hear about in the year ahead.
Can you just give a brief overview, because we do have a lot of listeners who are not realtors, they might be in the mortgage space or whatever, what that clear cooperation policy, what that is? What are we talking about?
Absolutely. So clear cooperation is a National Association of Realtors policy that requires listing brokers to list a property on the MLS within 24 hours of marketing that property. And in theory, that policy is in place to ensure that home buyers and other brokers and agents in the industry have access to all the information and all the inventory that is for sale. The proponents of clear cooperation, really like that free flow of information. They like kind of the open marketplace that it creates, and that buyers don't have to look at 5 or 6 different websites in order to see all the listings and all the properties for sale that they have access to in their given area. Those who are not in support of clear cooperation feel like it doesn't give sellers the choice of how they want to market their property. And it also creates things like days on market, or and it shows price change history and things like that, which some people feel are negative for home sellers and harmful for home sellers who may be looking to get top dollar. Because a buyer, if they see a property's been on the market for 2 months, they may try to go in under asking. Or if they've seen, several price reductions, they could feel that the home seller is, rather motivated, and again, will come in under asking, preventing that home seller from getting top dollar, the price that they, in theory, want for their property. So, yeah, I think that's definitely going to be a theme moving forward for sure.
Boy, I think you've hit it on the head with the MLS and the clear cooperation policy. And it feels like we're just now getting to some of that. I mean, the action of NAR against the Phoenix realtors is super interesting as we head into the new year to see, okay, who's going to, who prevails there? And does the DOJ get involved in that? What are the implications if they're successful in revoking that charter, or like, what does that look like? So to me, that was one of the most interesting stories about realtors this year, is because it really goes to the heart of like how they're organized,
Mm-hmm.
how they can be organized, how they're going to share this information, and this just happened.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be a big topic moving forward. And I think it also is going to be, especially on the clear cooperation front, going to be a big topic for consumers as well, because I don't think a consumer would be thrilled if you told them they had to go to these, 10 different websites in order to see all the homes for sale in their neighborhood or in their county or wherever they're looking to purchase a home. But as a home seller, as this issue is gaining kind of more traction in the mainstream media, you know, home sellers might be more aware of some of these things and be like, hey, I don't want the number of days my home's been on the market to be shown on the internet or somewhere. I think this is something that the real estate industry and real estate professionals are going to have to figure out how to address with consumers, and figure out kind of where they stand on the issue and how they want to communicate the pros and cons of both sides of the argument to the general public.
Boy, I think that's so important. I know this year you have met, and I've met a ton of leadership at different organizations, from national level down to state level, down to, even more than that. And one thing we can say is that people are very hungry for information, and looking to lead out, whether that's at a trade association leadership level, or if it's just individual brokerages, their leaders leading out. So we're going to keep an eye on all of this. 2025 promises to be another very interesting year for those in the business of real estate.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
And just want to say thank you, Brooklee. I've heard from so many of our readers how thankful they are for your coverage, and just, the depth, the breadth of your coverage on this topic, on all these topics, has been incredible this year. And just want to say thank you, and looking forward to another year of coverage.
Well, thank you very much. I'm excited to kind of dive into these issues a bit more in the year to come for our readers and learn along with them, because I know far more about antitrust law than I did at the start of this year. So hoping to share some of that knowledge and with our readers.
Literally, how much time did you spend in LexisNexis and other systems to try to figure out what is going on?
I don't even want to know. I check LexisNexis is the first thing I check every single day when I wake up, which is probably really sad, but I spend a lot of time in there and I've gotten very, very good at using that database.
It shows, for people who don't know, it shows what lawsuits have been filed and where things are.
Yes.
Well, Brooklee, thank you so much. And if you guys, as listeners, if you want to reach out to Brooklee, you can always do that at brooklee@hwmedia.com. She is always looking for new sources, and she is an incredibly resourceful reporter. So, Brooklee, great coverage, and we'll see you again in the new year.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.